So I finally managed to get my hands on the new Ace Pro 2, which means yes, I purchased it with my own money, so let's get an honest and unbiased first impression of the new Insta360 Ace Pro 2. About a year ago, Insta360 launched their first standard action camera, the Ace Pro, and less than a year later we now have the second generation, the Ace Pro 2, offering a number of enhancements over the original. But just how good are those enhancements, and has Insta360 addressed the shortcomings of the original? That's what we want to focus on in today's video. Now, this is the first of several videos I'll be posting featuring the Ace Pro 2. I'll also be doing a three-way comparison against the DJI Action 5 Pro and the GoPro Hero 13, and we'll also be doing some in-depth testing into things like the bitrate, compatible memory cards, and so on. So be on the lookout for those videos also. Now, there's quite a bit to cover here, so I'll place the chapters up here and on the video timeline. But before we get started, very important to emphasize this video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. I purchased all of the equipment with my own money, and the opinions are entirely my own. And also, if you enjoy the video, please remember to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. So let's get on with it. So before we get into the differences between the Ace Pro and the Ace Pro 2, let's first of all just do an overview of the design and main highlight, which is basically the same for both cameras. Maybe we'll start out by placing it alongside its predecessor, the original Ace Pro. Now, when the Ace Pro was first launched, it was by quite a distance the largest and heaviest of the current action cameras on the market, weighing in at 181 grams. Well, the Ace Pro 2, as you can see, is identical in size, although it has managed to lose about 4 of those grams, now tipping the scale at 177 grams. Now, as you can see, there is very little change from the original to the Ace Pro 2. There are some subtle design changes, and the most obvious difference you can see is the addition of this grill over the front-facing microphone. We'll talk more about that later on. But otherwise, as I said, apart from some small design changes, they are basically identical in every other way. As I mentioned, the Ace Pro and now Ace Pro 2 are definitely on the larger side here if you look at it in comparison to the recently released DJI Action 5 Pro. You can see it is significantly larger, and it is over 20% heavier than the Action 5 Pro. Now, one of the main reasons for that size is, of course, the touchscreen, which, just like the Ace Pro, can be flipped up and forward facing when filming yourself, and obviously you have then full access to the touchscreen even in this configuration. And in addition to the touchscreen, you also have this front facing display which shows the current status of the camera. Now, when it comes to capabilities, I would say Insta360 probably has the most different recording modes of any action camera currently. And also when it comes to shooting standard video, the Ace Pro and now Ace Pro 2 are the only action cameras that allow you to record in up to 8K resolution. And even if you're not planning to shoot your video in 8K, what's important to note is that with an 8K sensor, when you're filming in 4K, you can also zoom in by a factor of 2 and still maintain full 4K resolution. Now, one thing I've always liked about Insta360 cameras is they have a really good user interface and lots of convenience features. So for example, you'll find things like gesture control, voice control. If you start a recording and you're not happy with the results, you can hold down the record button and cancel the recording. When you set up a recording, you can also preset a duration for your recording, up to 3 hours, or just leave it on infinite. And probably one of the coolest features that I've seen recently is when you start a recording, you'll notice there is a timer here and a pause button here. So what I can do now is pause the recording, and whenever I want to, I can simply then restart the recording from that point and it will put it together as a single clip. You can even pull up a previously recorded clip, and you'll notice down here I can then add to this recording. So even though this recording was made previously, I can then just simply begin recording at the end of it, and once again this will continue to save this to the same clip. So let's talk about what is new and improved with the Ace Pro 2, and we're going to start with what is probably the biggest change, and that is the combination of the new sensor and processor. Now, many people were hoping for a larger sensor, perhaps a 1-inch sensor, but what we actually got with the Ace Pro 2 is the same size 1/1.3-inch sensor as found on the original, but it is an upgraded sensor with a higher pixel count. And together with the new 5nm AI chip, Insta360 claims this will give a 100% improvement in processing power and also a 100% improvement in low light detail. As far as the power is concerned, we can certainly see that in some of the specifications. 8K has now been upgraded to provide up to 30 frames per second, up from 24 on the original. Although, to be honest, I think that probably could have happened by way of a firmware upgrade on the old Ace Pro. But there are significant increases in some of the other modes, including the pure video mode and HDR video mode, both of which now allow filming in 4K up to 60 frames per second, up from 30 on the original Ace Pro. We've also seen an increase in the maximum bitrate, up from 170 megabits on the original to 180 megabits per second on the Ace Pro 2, which should also result in higher image quality. And a couple of other things worth mentioning are the inclusion of the Mega View field of view, which allows a very wide angle view without distortion, and also the inclusion of Leica color profiles, which should simplify the color grading process. Now, we're certainly not going to test all of these in today's video, but later on we're going to do a side-by-side of the Ace Pro versus the new Ace Pro 2 under different filming scenarios to see if the new sensor and chip are going to give us better image quality. Next up, let's talk about the battery. Now, the Ace Pro 2 comes with an upgraded battery, up from 1650 milliamp hours on the Ace Pro to now 1800 with the Ace Pro 2. Now, clearly increasing battery capacity is probably out of necessity in order to drive those new higher power components without sacrificing the runtime of the camera, and the good news here is that Insta360 have managed to do that. In my tests on the original Ace Pro, I was able to record in 4K 30 frames per second for around 86 minutes, and with the Ace Pro 2 under the same conditions, I can get about 93 minutes of recording time. Not only that, but the new battery/camera combination also allows for faster charging. Now, the original Ace Pro was no slouch here either, being able to charge up the battery to 80% in 27 minutes in my testing and fully charged in about 50 minutes, whereas the new Ace Pro 2 goes even further, charging up the battery to 80% in about 17 minutes in my testing and fully charged in about 40 minutes. And one other note regarding the new battery: even though Insta360 have increased that capacity, the form factor and size are identical, and they are also completely interchangeable. So the original battery works in the Ace Pro 2, the new battery also works in the Ace Pro. So yes, you can keep and use all the batteries and chargers that you've already invested in. Next up, let's talk about this guy here, this little grill that is over the microphone, which actually houses a built-in wind protector. There is a little piece of foam in here to act as a wind protector. It simply clips on to the front of the camera. A very simple idea which is intended to stop wind noise, and we'll see how well that works in some of our testing later on. Now, if you don't need this, and particularly if you're going underwater and you don't want to get this wet, there is this separate little cover that is included, which then just clips on in its place. The next improvement over the Ace Pro is the screen. Now it is slightly larger, 2.5 inches versus 2.4, but to be honest that is barely noticeable. However, what is noticeable is they've increased the pixel density and they've also increased the brightness. Now I'm really not sure that you're going to be able to see the difference in this particular shot here, but when playing around with the two cameras side by side, you can clearly see the difference. The preview on the Ace Pro 2 is definitely much clearer and sharper than it is on the original. Another nice change on the Ace Pro 2 is that the lens guard on the front is now removable. Now on the original Ace Pro this was not removable, so if this were to get scratched or damaged in any way, you'd basically have to replace the camera. Now with the Ace Pro 2, you simply turn and remove the front lens guard. Obviously this can be replaced at very low cost, but it also means that now you have the option to add filters and lenses onto your Ace Pro 2. There is already an ND filter set available on the Insta360 website, and I'm sure we'll see additional options become available from various manufacturers. And just a few miscellaneous improvements to mention. The Ace Pro 2 is now waterproof to 12 meters, up from 10 on the original. The maximum field of view has been increased to 157 degrees from 151 on the original, although some people might consider that a disadvantage. The maximum resolution for stills has been increased from 48 megapixels to 50 megapixels, and also you now have the ability to embed timecodes into your videos for synchronizing multiple cameras. So let's talk about some of the things that have not been changed for the Ace Pro 2 that perhaps should have been changed. And to be honest, there really aren't that many because the Ace Pro was already a pretty good camera. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about in this section is something I mentioned earlier on, and that is the size and weight. For an action camera, this thing really is big and heavy. If you currently own a GoPro, or particularly if you own one of the DJI Action Series cameras, when you get one of these things and you take it out of the box, the very first thing you will think is, man, that thing is big. It really is significantly larger and heavier, particularly than the DJI Action Series. Now, yes, the Ace Pro does have a relatively large sensor for an action camera at 1/1.3 inches, but so does the DJI also, so that's really not the reason. Now, as I mentioned, clearly the flip-up screen has a lot to do with its size, but again, I just really wish they could figure out a way of making this thing smaller and lighter. Next up, let's talk about the mount. Now, I'm not sure if Insta360 or DJI were the first on the scene with the quick release mount, and that was certainly a great development. But recently, GoPro went a step further when they introduced the Hero 13, which has not only a quick release mount, but also the GoPro fingers and also a 1/4 tripod mount, all built into the same mount, and I think GoPro have taken a step ahead here. And case in point, earlier today when I was doing some testing, I couldn't find my quick release mount, and I realized that without it I have no way of mounting this camera. So as ironic as it sounds, I think this is an area where Insta360 could learn something from the newest GoPro. And my final complaint in this section is something I've moaned about with Insta360 cameras for years now, and that is the poor support for external microphones, particularly for a camera that is obviously designed with vlogging in mind. Now, yes, you can connect a Bluetooth microphone, and the Bluetooth implementation is definitely improved compared to earlier versions, but Bluetooth is not the best quality. Sometimes you want to add a shotgun mic or a more professional microphone, and in order to do that, you have to buy this ridiculous external adapter. I just don't understand why you wouldn't just put the 3.5mm port directly in the camera, or at very least enable the audio profile on the USB-C port. Okay, time to do some comparison testing. Now, for all of these different clips, I had both cameras set to absolutely identical settings, 4K 30 frames per second. All exposure settings were set to automatic, auto white balance, standard color profile, medium sharpness, high bit rate, and an equivalent field of view. So let's take a look and see what we think. Okay, let's start out inside with standard lighting, no special lighting of any type. I have the Ace Pro on your left and the new Ace Pro 2 on your right. What do you think? How does the image quality compare between the two? I have everything set to fully automatic. We're recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. I have the face priority turned on both, and I have the field of view set to de-warp also on both cameras. Now, as far as the microphones are concerned, right now you're listening to me on the onboard microphones of the Ace Pro, which I have set to the direction focus. Let's switch over to the Ace Pro 2, which I have set to the voice focus. They don't actually have the same settings, so this is the nearest equivalent that I could find on both. But how does the audio quality compare between the two? Let's switch back over to the Ace Pro just to get that comparison. And then briefly back over to the Ace Pro 2. Are you hearing any difference at all between the audio quality of the two microphones? Okay, so now similar test, but now we have some studio style lighting. I have a very bright studio light, which is lighting me from this side, and a small fill light over on this side. So once again, what do you think? How does the image quality compare on the Ace Pro versus the new Ace Pro 2? Once again, I have the face priority turned on, so you should be seeing really good exposure on my face. Also, be sure to check out the dark shadows in the background. Are you seeing any noise in those shadows? Okay, the rain has stopped and the sun has come out, so let's do some walking and talking. Once again, I have the Ace Pro on your left and the new Ace Pro 2 on your right. I have them set to 4K 30 frames per second. Everything is set to automatic. I have the face enhancement enabled on both. So what do you think? How is the quality between the two? Are you seeing any difference at all? Look also behind me in the trees to see if you're seeing any digital artifacts from the stabilization. And also let's test the audio while we are here. So right now you're listening to me on the onboard microphones of the original Ace Pro. Let's switch over to the Ace Pro 2. Now currently I have them set to a standard setting that would be directional on the Ace Pro and voice enhancement on the Ace Pro 2. They don't actually have the same modes there. In just a moment I'll enable wind reduction, but there isn't a lot of wind today, so I'm not sure if any of that is coming through. Let's switch back over to the Ace for a moment, and also you'll notice behind me we've got some nice sunlight coming through the trees. Let's see how both cameras handle that sunlight as well. Okay, so now I've enabled the wind reduction on both cameras. There's a little bit of a breeze. I'm not sure if you're really going to hear much, but right now you're listening to me on the microphones of the Ace Pro. Let's switch over to the Ace Pro 2 to see if there is any difference in the audio quality now with wind reduction enabled. Also, I'm noticing that sunlight now creeping through the trees. That should create a nice challenging image. Let's see how both of those cameras manage the bright sunlight in the background. Are they able to effectively continue focusing and exposing on the bright sunlight in the background? Are they able to effectively continue focusing and exposing on the face correctly? Okay, now let's also get a little bit of B-roll, particularly with this nice sun coming through the trees here. How is the image quality between the two? I have both set to the de-warp setting. Let's try the stabilization test. Got a little bit of a run. When I set about doing this comparison, I honestly didn't think there would be that much difference between the two cameras, so these results came as quite a surprise to me. As I said in the captions, I was pretty impressed with the overall image quality of the Ace Pro 2. It showed really good detail, good sharpness, the dynamic range was good, and I thought the colors were particularly good and very natural. And it really was quite a surprise to me that the image quality was noticeably better than the original. So much so that I actually went in and double-checked and triple-checked to make sure I had all the settings identical, which was indeed the case. Now, the one possible issue I did notice, and it's probably due to that widened field of view, is the added lens flare that you get. Now, that could also be a bit of a problem when you're filming low-light scenes with a lot of bright lights in it, but that's something I definitely will have to test out. As far as the audio quality is concerned, here too I thought the Ace Pro 2 did a better job than the original, especially in the indoor test where the difference was particularly noticeable. And also when it came to the audio, I thought initially the little windshield might be a little bit of a gimmick, but as we heard during the tests, it really did make a difference. So what is the verdict on the new Insta360 Ace Pro 2? Well, personally, I am pretty impressed. They've taken what was an already good camera and they've made it even better, particularly in the most important aspect, which of course is image quality. And I'm definitely looking forward to putting it up against the GoPro Hero 13 and the DJI Action 5 Pro to see how it stacks up against those also, so be on the lookout for that video coming up soon. So that wraps it up for another video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please remember to give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more similar content. If you have any questions, any comments, if you wish to share your opinions on the new Ace Pro 2, please drop those into the comments section. Otherwise, thanks for watching.